Hey, you're at Steve Tech. I'm Steve. Today I wanted to continue the Valve Train series that we're doing, and so our next one is going to be, I think we got to do lifters, and then we'll get right to the camshaft, which is, like I said before, is really tricky, and there's a lot involved in that, and not as much as what you think involved, but more than what you think is involved, etc., etc. So, anyways, what I wanted to cover today is valve retainer keeper, lash cap, valve tip design, etc. So, what we'll start out with here is your typical, and there's a lot of little small camera work that you'll have to see here that we'll try to show you. But this is just your typical, this is LS valve. So this is just your typical small 7-degree keeper and retainer. Now we're not really, as far as the retainers go, I mean your retainer just needs to match what style spring you have. So we're not going to be talking about that because that's just whatever your spring requires. But we're going to talk about the keeper style, the retainer style, and then lash cap and valve tips. Okay, so your standard steel valve, all steel valves have a hardened tip already on them. Every steel valve has a hardened tip. Okay, so if you're going to run your standard little 7-degree, which is these really small little keepers, 7-degree stock style keeper, really you're only going to see those in LS stuff anymore. This is a dual spring retainer. This is normal, good hydraulic roller spring stuff, no problem. Steel valve, hardened tip, everything works real good. So that's just kind of your standard deal. Remember that 7-degree keeper, standard deal. Okay, so that's real nice, easy, no big deal. You can see how this stuff all kind of fits on the valve stem, like that. All right. So the next thing we would do is we would then go to your 10-degree keeper, and then possibly a lash cap. All right, now this is a 10-degree style keeper. You notice how much bigger the keeper is. Okay, this is a used one, but you can see how much bigger that keeper is. All right, now that 10-degree, so the reason they do that is that it puts a bigger wedge, you know, to try pulling through the retainer. So like your 7-degree retainers like this, and then your 10-degree retainer keepers are like this. So it gives it all this extra area to try to push and pull through. All right. Now, as far as the lash cap, now let's still talk with steel valve. The steel valve, the tips are hardened, but they're induction hardened. They're not actually have a hardened tip pressed into them. We'll explain that in just a second. So they're hard. You can put a lash cap on there, and what that does is gives you more area for the rocker arm to ride on. Okay, that area right there is bigger for the rocker arm than that area. Now you do have to have this special keeper, a lash cap style keeper that has that recess. You can see the recess there, and then the lash cap fits all into it. But the lash cap can come off and, you know, pop off like that. Okay, so that would just give you more area for your rocker arm to travel on. Even though if you set your valve train up appropriately, and we'll go over that, if you set your valve train up appropriately with your rocker arm and the tip dimensions, you really shouldn't need this big surface area. But if you have really big stuff like 1-inch lift camshafts, you're going to end up having more because the rocker arm tip sweeps quite a bit. But that'll be a separate issue. So we've been talking about the steel valve. The steel valve has an induction hardened, it's all one piece. Now if you go to a titanium valve, we can show you on this. If you go to a titanium valves will come one of two ways. They will either have a wafer, as you can see right there, you can see a real light little line right there. This has a hardened tip that's actually machined and pressed into the end of the valve. Now, what that means is that hardened tip is not the same material as the titanium, and it's pressed in with a little pin pretty much. All right. Now, if you put a lash cap on a hardened tip, on a hardened wafer tip titanium valve, is no bueno. Alright? Because what happens is these these lash caps end up rocking. Very minutely. I mean, this is over exaggerated, but they rock. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you rock on something that's pressed into the end of there? Pop! It pops the hardened tip off. You cannot run lash caps on a hardened wafer tip valve. It will break off, usually within minutes or passes. It will break that hardened tip right off of your valve stem. Then you got a whole bunch of stuff floating around in there, which is absolutely no good. All right. Now, so that's on the lash cap side and the hardened tip side. Now, going back to like grooves, your typical Chevrolet stuff, Ford stuff, Chrysler stuff, all old school engine build stuff would all have a square groove retainer keeper. Okay. The square groove is quite literally that. It's just cut square and square in the keeper. But these, all LS's and all really good race stuff, is all going to be a radial groove. Okay, so if you look here, you can see that is radial. It's actually rounded in there. Okay, versus a smaller, thinner square. So what does that do? It does two things. Sharp edges make cracks. Sharp edges make things that can shear and pull right off. Radius or rounded parts, it is very hard, if not impossible, to actually shear or pull off something that's round. So like a square keyway in a crankshaft, you can shear it right off. If you put a round keyway in a crankshaft, it actually can't shear. It'll try rolling over the top of it, but it won't shear it. It's a weird deal. Okay, so radial groove is always the best, but you need to have matched up stuff. Now, we'll go to what we do on all my SMX stuff, like what's right here. So this is Smx Valve Train. You can't really see the retainer keeper in through here. So I mean, this is that small spring, like we talked about the small springs before. And this has what we call a sewer lid style lash cap keeper. All right, now I'll show you that. So this is what is the ultimate. Let me put this back together so I don't lose all this stuff. These are for individual jobs, so I want to make sure that I keep this stuff all together. So this actually goes to that job. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up just one little bit. Another style of keeper is called a capture lock. So this is a really nice setup. If you have a hardened tip in your valve stem, so this is a titanium valve, okay? This particular valve is not a hardened tip because it's out of one of my SMXs. So I'm just giving you an illustration. If this was a hardened tip, remember it'd have like 100 thousandths tip and it's pressed into the end of it, all right? This lash cap is called a capture lock. And what this capture lock does is it has this extension right here, has that extension, which comes up and actually grabs your tip. It makes a nice little flat. Actually, the tip will be just slightly above the keeper, of course, but makes this nice captured, grabs it, makes it all nice and tight, and keeps that tip from breaking off. Because in the normal application, if you have that lash cap, or even if you don't have the lash cap, you have a whole bunch of material that's just exposed. That tip is exposed, and the hardened tips will tend to break off. So if you have a hardened tip, titanium valve, you're going to want to use a capture lock. Let me put that over there. You're going to want to use a capture lock keeper. I got these things. If you need them, just give me a call. I'll set you up with the right stuff. So, hardened wafer tip in a titanium valve. You need capture lock keeper. You'd want to do these in a radial groove is the best. So this is a really good, strong setup. Okay. What we're using now for what I feel is the ultimate setup is a sewer lid design. Now, if you see this is hard to do here, but this lash cap is actually floating. See right there? It has a little, you see a little ledge right there, and that is what captures it. Alright, so this lash cap actually fits in there, and when it's all put together on the valve, I'll show you on this SMX valve here, when it's all put together on the valve, and these are a little bit of a bugger to put together. Right, here would be your normal deal, you know, that would just be your normal deal like that, but this lash cap goes on and then is, yeah, it's a little tight. There you go. The keepers come in, grab it, and keep it from going anywhere. So this lash cap can never come off. So when it's all together, you now have this nice tool steel. We use a tool steel. They'll make them in titanium, but we found that the tool steel ones I like better. This whole thing basically is one nice assembly. Alright, and so all these parts have to be machined exact tolerances, because you can't have this lash cap touching well, it has to be right in on the valve stem, but allowing the keeper to actually float, because if the keeper is allowed to move up or down, it's going to become unlodged, come all apart. So the keepers are on there super tight, they're in this radial groove, everything's cool, and then this lash cap actually sits in there and just kind of can float real lightly, but never come off, never have an issue. So you would want to do this on a non-hardened tip valve. So for instance, all the stuff we do like this, my SMXs or 481Xs or Hemis, whatever it is, we do this all with this sewer lid style deal. Gives us maximum protection for the valve tip, gives us maximum strength and durability. Okay, so that's how that all holds together, fits in, and works to make that right. Now, one last thing that I would tell you on all of this is I'm also real particular about always keeping manufacturer stuff with manufacturer stuff. So I don't mix and match. Springs isn't a big deal, but I use a retainer keeper lash cap combo from one manufacturer. So I get the retainers from whoever we get them from. Victory's, we use a lot of their stuff. Wouldn't matter if it's Manly or Victory or Pack. I use a Pack retainer keeper. Use a Victory retainer keeper, lash cap combo, Manly, whatever. I always use those in match sets, so I don't like to mix and match just in case there's just slight little discrepancies. And then again, when you're doing this sewer lid deal, the valve stem tip has to be perfect. So from radial groove to valve stem tip has to be 0.250. So a 1/4 inch is what they set these up at. If it's 270, you're screwed. Ain't gonna work. If it's more than that, or sorry, less than that, if it's like 220 or 230, you're screwed, because then all of a sudden the lash cap is pushing on the keepers instead of on the valve. Okay, so all this stuff really matters, really counts, but this is the current best system that I found, most durable, lives through drag week, does everything great through there. The radial groove sewer lid keeper is the best. If you have a hardened wafer tip lifter, you'd want to use the capture locks. Otherwise, you want to use a standard 10-degree retainer keeper combo. You can do a lash cap if you want. We'll kind of cover why you would even want a lash cap in the first place if you're not protecting the valve. So let me backtrack up one more time here. Sorry. The reason we run this lash cap like this is because we have to protect the valve. If you have in titanium, if you have a non-hardened tip or a non-lash cap, these things will last quite literally seconds. It will run the roller wheel of your lifter. It'll just sit there and wear right through the valve stem tip. Go down, hit your keepers, push your keepers off, drop the valve in very, very short amount of time. Okay, so that's why we have to have some form of lash cap, and we do the lash cap because this is just a better, nicer, more durable deal than having a hardened tip. Because even if I have a hardened tip in here with these capture locks, I've still broken that hardened tip even with a capture lock like this. So my most preferable method for any application, it's a little expensive, but this is the best way of doing it, to do the sewer lid combo. So if you ever need this stuff, like I said, I can more than happy to sell it to you, set you up with what you need, make sure you get all the right parts, match your springs and all that other stuff. So anyways, this is really good tech on keepers, retainers, and the lash cap design. As far as titanium, steel, tool steel, might be some other alloys or some other stuff out there. Obviously, we're using the lighter the better up here, as long as it's durable. So there is a little bit of a compromise in durability sometimes. We don't use a steel retainer. Nobody really uses a steel retainer. You can get them in like a Pacaloy or a Moly, chromoly tool steel retainer. They're pretty good, but the titanium stuff, the sewer lid, really has just been the best combination that we found. There are some others out there, but this is what we found to be the best. So anyways, I'm Steve Morris at Steve Tech. I hope you're enjoying these series. If you have any questions, or which is what you guys are free to do, if you have a question about something you're seeing here, you have access. Send me an email. I'm more than happy to answer those questions for you. If you're not watching these videos, you're not going to have any questions, so you're not going to ask me, so I guess I don't even have to tell you not to bother. So anyways, I'm Steve Morris, Steve Tech. Have a great day.